Welcome everyone, this is Vintage Story, and in today's video we're going to be talking about how to make fruit bread. We're also going to be discussing the toppings that can go on these breads, and we'll be discussing the mixing bowl itself, which is a critical kitchen tool you'll need to make the fruit bread. And of course, we're going to be using two particular mods for the recipe and some of the tools we'll be using, such as the bowl. Those are expanded foods and a culinary artillery. So I've got many other videos in my how-to series, including other recipes that utilize these particular mods, so make sure you check the pinned comment for that playlist, and let's get into the kitchen. And the first thing we're going to discuss is the mixing bowl, because this is a crucial component, not just for this recipe, but for many of the recipes in the expanded foods mod. Of course, it is provided by a culinary artillery, so let's check it out and see what we're going to need. And I've got everything here. It's a fairly simple recipe. The saucepan, you could literally make this on day one. It's just a pottery recipe fired in a pit kiln. I recommend maybe you make two of these, because the saucepan is actually a good tool for boiling, making bone broth and things like that. But you're going to want one here, and we're going to put it in the crafting grid, and it will produce the mixing bowl. But we're not quite done yet. In order to make this a powered mixing bowl, we'll put that right back in the crafting grid. Any old table will do. And we need a saw and an axle, just one. Boom, there we go. So we've got our powered mixing bowl now, and as I mentioned, it can be hooked up to a windmill. Makes it super convenient, but you can also stand here just like a cairn and manually press it once you put some proper ingredients inside. Now that we've got our mixing bowls all set up, it's time to talk about ingredients. So let's take a look at what we've got. Now, of course, any type of flour will work to make bread, and then of course we're going to make fruit bread out of the dough, but I'm using rice grain because it does have the highest satiety of any of the grains. And then of course we just need a little bit of water to make the actual dough. I'm just going to do a half a stack here for demonstration purposes, and I don't need a whole lot of it. It will spoil eventually, but we'll get into that later once we start baking it. And of course, lastly, but most importantly, we need some kind of fruit. And I would recommend as much as you can get your hands on it. You're going to see here shortly that this recipe takes a lot of fruit, but that's a good thing, and especially if you got multiple berry bushes like I do here. So this is a really great recipe for your harvest of berries when you've just got so many you know they're going to start to spoil. Start making fruit bread. But with that said, let's get inside and start mixing this stuff up. And here we are at the mixing bowls, but before we get started, one note about the X Skills mod that I have. Really fantastic mod, highly recommend it, and I think I'm going to do a separate video on it in the future, but for the purposes of today's video, it's going to affect two different things. The outcome of the bread's satiety is probably going to be buffed a little bit because of some of the skills I've got, and you'll notice that when I'm putting ingredients into the mixing bowls, I'm going to be able to add a lot more servings than you probably will be if you're not playing with the X skills, or if you just have yours laid out differently than mine. But just wanted to mention it before we jump in, so there's no surprises when you see some differences here. But let's go ahead and throw our dough into the mixing bowl. Now you'll see nothing pops up here, so this dough by itself isn't a viable recipe, but as soon as we start putting some berries in here, yes, you can see that the fruit dough tooltip pops up, and that lets us know that there is going to be a viable outcome here. Now let's pay a close attention to the number of berries I'm putting in here. Of course, like I said, the serving size is higher. I think by default 6 will be the max you'll be able to put into each one of these slots, but what I'm referring to now here is the number of these boxes we fill with the berries. You can see, even if I just put, for instance, one single berry in one of the boxes, it will still produce one piece of bread with a single fruit in it. I'm not going to let it go through with that because it's kind of a waste of the dough, but what I like to do is try and max it out with as much fruit as you can pack in there. So I get 12 or max servings per box, and I go for all 5 of the boxes. Now, another note about this, and then we'll actually start to mix the dough, is if I do something like this, so we've got different numbers, different things, the outcome of these will not stack together too. So it's important to know, if you want to be able to have a nice neat stack of this finished product, make sure you're using the same dough and the same number of berries per slot. So let's go ahead and fill them, and we'll let the mixing bowls actually do their work here. Doesn't take long because we got a pretty good wind speed right now. Boom, there it is. So we've got some raw fruit dough here. And again, you'll see it's got a quality to it, but that's because of X-Skills. Now, the next step is to bake this stuff. So let's jump over to the ovens. Okay, and for this next step, we're going to take a look at another mod that we've got installed here. This is called the Stone Bake Oven. Now, functionally, it will cook everything that the vanilla ovens will cook, but if you're like me and you get a little frustrated by just how quickly those ovens do cool off and how inefficient they are in terms of their fuel use, then check this one out. Again, it's called the Stone Bake Oven, and it can be as big or small as you want, but we're going to slap these onto the baking surfaces here. I've already loaded it up with a bit of fuel and lit it, so it's currently warming up. You can see each one of these surface temperatures is at 300 in the tooltip above, and let's wait until our first batch is fully cooked. Alright, we've got some partially baked dough, should be ready any moment now. And we'll grab it, throw the first batch back into the mixing bowl. That's right, just because we've baked this stuff does not mean we're quite finished with it yet. So let's see. Okay, it's done. It's very light brown because it's a rice dough, but otherwise this bread is ready. Now, if I left it on, of course it would char, which would reduce the overall satiety of the bread, but it would extend its shelf life. So definitely something to, consider if you're worried about some of this stuff spoiling. But I'm going to get another round going, set this up so that while we put this in our mixing bowl, we'll have some work going on the side. Now, as I mentioned, baking the bread is just one step in the process. You could technically eat it at this point, it'd be perfectly fine, but if we put some toppings on it, it's going to make it even better. So it'll bolster the satiety, and depending on what toppings we use, it can even give it healing properties. So let's grab a bucket of honey for starters. This is probably the simplest topping we could use for fruit bread, and of course remember it needs to be cooked. You can't put raw fruit bread dough in here. You do need to either cook it to normal temps or just char it. Either one will work, but we're going to put 12 servings. Of course, again, for you it will be 6 most likely, and we're just going to splash some honey in there. There it goes. It doesn't have to be precise. It will simply just draw from whatever amount of honey you put in here for each little loaf of bread. There it is. But as long as you have enough overall. There we go. So we've got some syrup-covered fruit bread. Delicious. And once again, you'll see the satiety is probably different on yours than it is mine. But this is a really phenomenal traveling food and stuff. But we're not done. Honey is, like I said, probably one of the simpler toppings. So let's actually grab that right back out of there. We're going to put these away. We've got 7 loaves of the honey bread, but let's make something a little bit more special. Let's see, I've got, where is it? Where is it? A secret ingredient? There it is. Peanut butter. That's right. We're going to put away this honey and we're going to fill a bucket of peanut butter and use that to cover the bread. Let's see the difference the peanut butter provides. Okay, here we go. We've got peanut butter in the second slot now, and it's about to pump out the first batch. It still calls it syrup covered, but it definitely gives you a protein. Over here, we just see at the bottom fruit and grain as extra nutrients. But over here, yeah, we've got vegetable and protein stats. And right next to the fruit saturation, you can see 1.5 HP. That means this is going to heal us up too when we consume this. So peanut butter is a very superior topping. But I'm not going to leave you high and dry. We're going to cover how to make peanut butter right now. The first step in making peanut butter is to get your hands on some peanuts. Now, these grow normally in the southern parts of the world or the warmer regions, so you can find them growing naturally and then cultivate them yourself. And they do last for quite a long time, so it's a good food to get your hands on. Now, the first step after getting your hands on some is to heat them up in your oven. That's right, we want to make roasted peanuts here. So we're going to slap these on and give it just a moment to heat up. Alright, we're almost done here with our batch of peanuts. These actually don't take very long. There is no partially baked. They just go from raw to finished right there. And we'll grab them. Awesome. It's a fairly easy process. Put that one back. There we go. The next step is just put them in your crafting grid. That's how you separate the kernels from the skins. There it is. The skins can be useful to feed your pigs, or they can actually be used as fertilizer for nitrogen and a little bit of the phosphorus. Yeah, but let's finish separating the rest of these because, yeah, we need to get the kernels. That's what will be required for the next stage. Okay, there are several steps for peanut butter, but you'll find they're all fairly easy. So next stage is to take the kernels that we just roasted up and separated and put them in a cairn. And you can see I've got mine hooked up to the windmill, and that's going to produce peanut paste. So not quite peanut butter. We've got another round of mixing to do once we get a fair amount of paste build up. So let's jump to that next. Alright, the cairn is hard at work and we've built up quite a bit of it, so let's go ahead and grab this. No bucket required for the peanut paste itself, but you will need an empty bucket once it's converted into peanut butter to remove it. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. First, we got to turn this stuff into the golden peanut butter that we're looking for. So you could also at this point convert it into peanut sauce, but that's totally different, obviously. Maybe we'll do that for a future video. But first step, there are several different varieties depending on just your ingredients. If you don't have salt, you don't have to put it in there. The salt is really just for preservative purposes. It'll make it last a lot longer. But you could do something just as simple as oil and peanut paste. Although, you know me, we're going to go for something a bit more elaborate here. So I've got peanut paste in the first slot. Then I'll go ahead and throw the salt in the last one. No big deal. Now, let's get some honey in there. And you can see it's making peanut candy, but boom, if I add the oil to it, it turns it into peanut butter. And this is one of those recipes you don't have to get real super careful about the measurements. Just slosh whatever you've got into there, and there it is. Peanut butter is the final output. Like I said too, we'll need an empty bucket to pick that up and collect it, but once we do, we can toss it into our barrel over here. Yep, beautiful. And you can see in the tooltip, this right here is going to last me almost 5 years. So it's really fun stuff to make, and it's a great topping for bread. I'm sure there's other uses too we can find for it. And let me just point out, if you're curious where it's at in the handbook, peanut butter is under expanded liquids. It's considered a liquid here. There it is, peanut butter. So this will give you that little brief listing if you've forgotten. But also don't forget, you could just rewatch the video today. And now that we've seen how to make fruit bread and peanut butter, that's going to do it for today's tutorial video. But don't worry, I'm going to have plenty more cooking videos and just general help videos along with mod showcase, a whole bunch of stuff. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Leave me some comments below if you've got ideas for recipes you'd like to see, or like I say, just general help videos. I appreciate you all very much, and I will see you on the next one.